Well, good evening and welcome, everyone. I'm so glad you're here. This is Jennifer Reynolds. I am your armchair traveler, and this evening we're going to go off on another bit of a travel journey, and I'm so glad you could join me. I've worked and lived and been in travel all of my life. I worked on cruise ships for over 18 years, and I really enjoyed travel. I was 18 years on cruise ships, born and raised in Canada. My first husband was a juggler unicyclist. The second one was an oceanographer with a PhD. So, with the second one, I developed a tremendous passion for history and geography and travel, and was really a magnificent time. But I share that photograph from my years of running shore excursions on board the Silver Cloud. Welcome to Jennifer's Journeys. Over this last little while, these last couple of weeks, we've gone to a variety of places together. We pit stopped over to the Galapagos Islands. If you were with me last month in March, we looked at some history of the Panama Canal and also did a partial transit through the Panama Canal. Italy is always a favorite. We looked intensely at Italy, particularly Venice, and some of the challenges that face Venice, and Rome, Florence, and Venice, the magic of this country, and why we love to travel and go there so much, and frankly, why we call Italy a lifestyle and not really a country. Ireland, and staring from the cliffs of Moher off the west coast and looking towards Canada. Just a few days ago, we went to Machu Picchu in the Sacred Valley, spending some time in the Peruvian Amazon, that upper part of the Amazon that flows down through the Brazil. And just the other night, a return to the Antarctic, a place I'm exquisitely passionate about. I call myself polar passionate. But there's also another place that I'm crazy about, and that is Africa. And initially, I was going to share with you the story of the Bermuda Triangle tonight, and I started getting lost in images in preparation for a trip I was doing last year in May as I went to Tanzania. I had tried 3 times to get over there. And this buffalo right over here, this Cape buffalo, was the first person that I ever, first person was the first real critter that I laid my eyes on in Africa, and I'd wanted to do this trip for so long. For a myriad of reasons, I chose to simply focus on Tanzania. I'd been to South Africa before. I'd been into Namibia. A lot of my traveling experiences had been from my years on cruise ships and, of course, from my oceanographer husband. But on this trip, I wanted to go to Africa. I wanted it to be all about animals. It was a trip I started to do on my 50th birthday, and I achieved it last year. And you can bet those Barnum and Bailey's animals, every time I saw a lion or a zebra, we would eat them as a collective group in our Jeep as we travel. But when I start looking at East Africa, those of you who've been with me for a little while know I'm a bit of a geography, history nut. I think in order to understand the majesty and the magic of where we're going, we need to understand and appreciate some of the geography. I flew in internationally into Kilimanjaro. My trip was focused for just about 2 weeks into Tarangire National Park here, up into Ngorongoro Crater, into the Serengeti, and then back again into Kilimanjaro. I tell you, I could easily go into Nairobi and over into Masai Mara. I have every intention of getting much further in depth into, if you've been to Africa, you completely get it. Yes, it is about the animals, and we're going to look at a lot about those animals too, but it is about the geography. I love the geography coloring book. But look over the right-hand side where you can see Tanzania. It's the largest, about the size of Texas. Kilimanjaro itself, Mount Kilimanjaro is over 19,000 feet high, and it's that great rift that flows down from Ethiopia there, that crater that makes all the difference in the world. And this is Tanzania. We're going to look at but a sliver of this country, coming into Arusha, down into Tarangire, some time in Lake Manyara, focusing in Ngorongoro and the Serengeti before returning back to Arusha. But acknowledging that, my goodness, this is like coming to Florida and going to the parking lot of Disney World. You're only just scratching the surface of what this country has to offer. The only view I had of Kilimanjaro was from the air, out of the airplane. That was the closest to Mount Kilimanjaro. When you start listening to Toto and they talk about Mount Kilimanjaro rising above the Serengeti, it's a load of crap. Get out your map and look at it. The Serengeti and Mount Kilimanjaro are nowhere near each other. But that's Kilimanjaro International Airport over there. It's not the easiest place in the world to get to. Delta, American. There's a variety of ways you can go in, a variety of ways you can break up the trip, but you're probably going to spend an overnight in Arusha on the way over or possibly on the way back. This was my hotel room at the coffee plantation in Arusha. I did have an extra post night. I was fortunate and was able to use miles to travel, and airlines being what they are did cancel my return flight, and I had an extra 1 or 2 nights I had to stay as a result of that. But I assure you, this really wasn't a hardship. Why? Because my travel agent sold me insurance, and that was a trip interruption, and I was able to recoup that money. Best visitor I had was that monkey right there. Was laying in the bathtub having a cold beer, looked up, and there was that monkey, and that cheeky monkey actually went around to the window that I had left open to the coffee service and took the sugar packets out of it, and I was quickly schooled in how to handle the monkeys and how to handle yourself. But when you head out of Arusha onto safari, it just sort of happens. We left out of Arusha. Tarangire was the first place that we were going to, and this was the first animal. This was the first photograph that I took with my camera, which, by the way, is what I call an idiot-proof camera. I had binoculars with me as well, but I quickly discovered that I could see the animals so close up through the lens of my camera that it wasn't uncommon for me to take 1,000 or 2,000 shots in a day. Not to say you're captivated or stuck behind the lens, but here's what made Tarangire, and others will say Tarangire or Tarangire. The river, the Tarangire River, is the primary source. There's over 700 lions in this park here. It's also said to have the largest elephant concentration in the world. And this is when I started to see some of the cats. And after the Serengeti National Park, it has the second highest wildlife population in an entire area of Tanzania. And what's interesting is not that many people go here per year. Less than 100,000 people go into this park. The concentration of animals was just ridiculous. We came in through Arusha. We arrived about lunchtime, dropped our gear off, went out for a drive in the afternoon. And this was just it for the entire afternoon, watching these herds and seeing the behaviors and watching them eat and watching them protect their young, watching them watch us. And all of this was in Tarangire. We hadn't even gone 4 more miles past that Cape Buffalo before we came across the baboons. They were in the road, they were on the vehicle, they were on all sides of us. In the park here, you'll find lions, there's leopards, cheetahs, all kinds of primates. I chose to go with a company with open vehicles. The time of year that I went was in May, which is considered a shoulder type. I'll show you what is recommended in terms of the season. And when people say, oh, what's the best time to go? I generally say pretty much any time you can get yourself there. This was a lovely couple that I traveled with. They were from South Carolina. If you can imagine, there was only the three of us on the journey. One of the reasons I chose the trip that I did is I was traveling single, and there wasn't a single supplement on this trip, so it was quite affordable. So shop around, and we know that's why we all use our travel agent partners, because it's our travel agents that are going to be able to match us up to the right product. There was no walking that was being done. We were within the vehicles themselves. I was concerned about food and how I was going to eat and do. I'm not a big eater. I'm not a great eater. Breakfasts were included, lunches, and our dinners were included pretty much every day. Sopa lodges were a highlight, and I'll tell you, I am so glad that this couple was as lovely and kind to me as they were. My biggest fear was that they weren't going to like me because there was nobody else for me to hang out with. But what you got to know in all of these parks is that there are a variety of experiences that can be chosen. Tarangire is fairly large. It's nowhere near as large what we'll see when you get to the Serengeti. But there are a number of lodges, and this is just an example of some of the lodges that are here. And yes, you can go tented. Yes, you can go camp. You can easily spend $13, $14, $1,500 a night to be in these places, but it doesn't have to be that way at all. On average, I spent about $500 per day, and that was food and accommodation. That was being out with our guides, generally at least twice a day. And shockingly, I was with African Travel. Our itinerary that we received from the company ahead of time and what we actually traveled on, there was many, many, many more things that were included that were even really identified. Giraffes were everywhere here in Tarangire, but the wildebeest, the elands, the impalas, the elephants, the rhinos, the lions. And it was here that we saw the tree climbing lions. And often you'll hear about them up in Lake Manyara. And all of these photographs you're seeing are mine that were taken with my camera, which is just a Joe average $200 or $300 camera, no special lens on it at all. You can see the lion in the tree. You can start to see the moon in the sky. It was getting towards the afternoon. Go back, do an overnight in your lodge, and the next day it begins all over again. Now we were making our way to Lake Manyara. There's no such time as wasted time on the road. I was quite surprised at the richness and the diversity of Lake Manyara area. I was also really surprised at the magnificence of the accommodations. Those mosquito nets aren't a joke. The fans are there for you as well. Once the sun goes down in the evening time, you're definitely going to need them. Laundry services were very good. And this is actually from Lake Manyara itself, looking down over the Rift Valley. Remember, the geography is what makes so much of this. And we're up in about a 3,000 foot above sea level altitude. I have a fascination with the moon. I always have, I always will. My father once said to me, just look at that moon and remember, no matter where you are in the world, it's the same moon that I'm seeing. It's the same moon that your nephew in Australia is seeing. It's the same moon we're all seeing. And this was my moon over Manyara, shot with my iPhone on an evening after dinner with a walk back to my room, which, by the way, you don't go alone. You are escorted because of the wildlife in the evening. This isn't a zoo. This is a park. And the wildlife roam quite naturally. But let's look at costs. There's a day cost. I snapped that photo to get into Lake Manyara, which is one of the smaller parks. Lake Manyara is only 100 square miles, so it's a much smaller park. But Lake Manyara, you can see the entrance fee per guest was $45 for 1, 2, 3 people. Then there's a fee for your guide, a fee for your vehicle. And so ultimately to go into Lake Manyara National Park for a day trip for the afternoon for 3 of us with our guide was $159 and 30 cents. So you take those into account, the costs to go into these parks. The cost to go into the Serengeti is about 4 times as much as it is to come in here. These are costs that are going to remain, and this is what is your fees are sustaining. It's like going into the Galapagos as a foreigner and paying $100. It's being here in Lake Manyara, birds, 300 to 400 species of birds. And I take joy in looking at these photographs. One particular reason, I look around my neck, I can see my globe and pieces of jewelry that I've had for a long period of time, that wristwatch on my arm. And I say that to you because not long after Africa, when I came back, my home was broken into and all of my jewelry was stolen. And so when I look at these images and I see these hippopotamuses, and I see the experiences and I relive them in my mind, I genuinely know that life isn't about stuff. It's about all of these experiences that I had a chance to have. The pink flamingos here in Lake Manyara, learning about the Rift Valley, Olduvai Gorge. You know, some of humanity goes back to these very areas in Africa. And yes, we saw eagles, and yes, the ever present, unbelievable elephant. And y'all, we were just a couple of days into this particular journey. But note the topography. Again, we are in the Lake Manyara area. There's other spots where altitudes or topography makes it too difficult for these critters to be able to get around. Different species of birds that are found in different environments. You suddenly see resorts and hotels that are carved out of nothingness, that are running on generators, with people that are so passionate about their animals, about their tourism. Unbelievable at nighttime to be sitting there having a beverage and watching an animal come over and drink from the swimming pool, because it's what they do. But there's always guards there to keep an eye out for you, and you don't go wandering around in the dark. I was shocked to discover that Hakuna Matata is a real word. I always thought it was a Disney made-up word, and it's not. This was celebrating an anniversary in the dining room. The food was just fantastic. And as I mentioned earlier, I was concerned because I am such a simple eater, and it was so easy to accommodate any kind of meal requests. Chicken, vegetables, the broccoli, the soups were out of this world. And you know, sometimes it's nice to try some of the local things that people will have a chance to try on those buffets. The desserts and the fruits were also really outrageous. But the time of the year that I went, we got a little bit of rain in May, as we made ourselves climb literally uphill to get into the Serengeti. We're going along, and I'll show you a map in a moment time. We actually got caught in so much mud. We lost a tire, and it happened twice, that we had to pull over, and it took about an hour and a half to fix the tire. And it was so much a part of the overall experience. But you know, everyone is always talking about the migration. And there in front of you is an excellent map that will give you an outline. The migration is constantly happening. This life is continually moving from one place to another. The northern Serengeti in the August to October, where they're crossing over into the border into Kenya, the animals may be able to travel freely over that border. And the Masai Mara is simply an extension of the Serengeti. But you will not be driving over that road. There's no official entry into the country. That won't be happening. But the migration is always happening. The animals are there, and the animals are consistently moving. And I think that's something that people really need to understand. And here we were in the Serengeti. And again, I was very surprised at the size, at the depth. Serengeti was established as a park in 1951. It was only 1979 when it was called UNESCO. It's the oldest ecosystem in the world. It's over 12,000 square miles, and depending where you are, you're 3,000 to 6,000 feet above sea level. It's huge. There are hundreds, truly hundreds of camps and places to stay here, from the top to others that are much more budget conscious. But as always in the world, you get what you paid for. Being in the vehicles themselves with the pop-up tops, some of them had rolled up canopies. It just depended on what tour operator you were traveling with. Generally, you didn't find any more than 6 to 8 individuals. And for the guides, I'm telling you, it was like the first time that they had ever seen these things. We were wearing out and saying, all right, let's drive on a little bit. And Edwin, our guide, would say, hang on, I think there might be some more activity coming up in just a moment. The views were exquisite. This was in the Serengeti from my hotel room, facing out, obviously facing westerly. Again, I just must comment on the meals in the evening and the chance to journal and review your photographs. The evening time tends to be for the guides themselves. Passengers will get together. Sometimes I just took dinner in the bar. Other times I joined my fellow companions, but the rooms were fabulous everywhere. The showers were great. If you needed to turn around and do laundry, that was always really easy as well. But you'll only make the mistake once about leaving the window open because, yes, the mosquitoes are definitely assertive, might be a great word. There we were in the Serengeti again in the evening time. The sun sets, the sun rises, the swimming pools. It was just absolutely magical. And knowing that people always ask or insist on what's the best time of the year to go someplace. Well, there it is. I lifted that information from a website. During the dry season from June to October, I happened to go in May and early May and just simply couldn't have done or been any happier with my overall experience because it was this time last year when I was getting ready and my gear was arriving and my tickets came and I needed to buy t-shirts and doing my research on the animals and digging out maps to discover more about where I was going. Um, a lot of meals. We would do picnics in the park. When we were out for the day, the option was ours. If it was a full day out, we most often would try to take advantage of every single minute because I'm not going to lie, I'm cat crazy. And when you can get this close to critters, when you can get this close to leopards and cheetahs, when you're hunting for the big five, which is lions and rhinos and an elephant, a leopard, and a buffalo. When you see these guys sleeping in the trees, when you see them having lunch in the trees and you can watch this experience and you can photograph it, this is certainly Mother Nature at its most exquisite moments. It wasn't busy when I went. We had the opportunity. There was enough privacy for everyone. I could certainly see how during other times of the year things could really get busy. It's set up in the Serengeti, about 100,000 people a year. Loved the hippo pool. That was the one day that my camera acted up on me. I had 2 batteries with me, neither of them that I was charging properly. Goes to show you need to read instructions. I had never, ever seen anything like this in my life. We must have been here for a good 20 minutes, 30 minutes, and then having the chance to have this experience through other people's eyes, watching kids and other nationalities come in and snap their photographs and their enthusiasm. And for an additional amount of money, about $500, a balloon ride over the Serengeti, in my opinion, is probably the best spent money ever. Leaving in the dark very early in the morning from your camp or wherever you're staying, catching up with your balloon guides, and just as the sun rises, being over the Serengeti and having moments that you just didn't know could exist in life. And these are the experiences, these are the things that live forever in our hearts. These are the things we strive to have. And this, I'm going back to Africa. We had breakfast in the Serengeti after the balloon ride, and I got to admit it was a bit intimidating at first, but yeah, that probably was the best view that I've ever seen from a bathroom, except for one in a high-rise office building in Melbourne, Australia. They had a floor-to-ceiling that overlooked the city. That was, I don't know, that was a little nerve-wracking. The Serengeti is absolutely exquisite. The animals and the plants and the waterways here are exactly as they were over 1,000,000 years ago. Cheetahs, leopards, we saw them on the ground. We saw them with their kill. Look closely behind the bush in front of Mama's face there. And that little one was waiting for us. We spent about 45 minutes watching these guys. We saw the mama, we saw them hunt, we saw them up into the trees, we saw the leopards in the Serengeti proper up on the ant hills where you could see them a mile away. And the way that you can tell the difference between the leopard, of course, as you see the cheetah is diurnal, meaning during the day. The leopard is nocturnal, and one has flowered spots, the leopard and the cheetah, flowers, and one has spots. It's really easy to mix these two up. And when you see those lines on a cheetah, though, that in the distance sends shivers. It makes your hair stand up on the back of your neck. But this is the area of the Maasai. And Maasai were actually in the Serengeti and were relocated into Ngorongoro crater. Ngoro is a really interesting area, and we're going to look at that in just a moment, up to 11,000 feet high. It's just really, it's 8,000, sorry, 8,000 up. But the Maasai in this area are pastoral individuals. It's quite surprising the amount of youngsters that are still taking up the way of life. One would think that many would be going the Western way, and that's not necessarily the case. But if you ever do any more research about the Maasai and what happened with the Serengeti and the Ngorongoro, it certainly makes for a tremendous amount of reading. And as you are in the Ngorongoro area coming into the Serengeti, you start to see the homes, you start to see the villages, you see the herds. And then our last park that we visited was Ngorongoro Crater. This is indeed a collapsed caldera. And we've heard that word before, Deception Island in Antarctic. You know of it in Santorini in Greece. This particular caldera, about 8,000 feet up on the edge, 5,000 feet down on the crater. 10 to 12 miles across is what you're going to find in about 102 square miles. And that was the view from my hotel room, from the rim of the crater, where again, there are tremendous choices. Gazing down into this crater where I assure you, you have no idea of the quantity of life that exists in this crater. As you go down, and it takes a little while, there's one road you go down, another road on the other side that you come up. So you're descending down about 3,000 feet to the base of the crater, about 100 feet, 100 square miles across, and this is it. It's the grass, it's the zebra. There's about 40,000 animals in this area. Leopards, cheetahs, elephants, hyenas, warthog. There was one of the hyenas, and there was Mama not too far away. This was a journey watching a group of lions that was quite amusing. It was a mama and a number of cubs. And there we rolled into another image. And then finally, I grasped this one, which was probably one of my favorite photographs that I took away. And there they finally ended up, and there was actually the full pride laying out, sort of having a rest in the plains in Ngorongoro. Papa just looking on, seeing what's happening. Areas of the crater, the base of the crater, were just covered in flowers. That was also something that was very significant to me. This is called the Garden of Eden. And if you ever watch Out of Africa, this is something that should immediately come to mind because it's that exquisite Ngorongoro crater. Some of the most beautiful lifelong memories in Africa and some beautiful places throughout the world. The Big Five, as we know them, and you'll see them in Tanzania. Well, pretty close anyway. We saw the elephant. We definitely saw the lion. We saw the leopard. The Cape buffalo was pretty much everywhere. The rhino is primarily, particularly the black rhino, and I'll put in quotes, commonly found in Ngorongoro Crater. We did see one at a great off distance that you could tell was a rhino, so I guess I could see that we did see all of the Big Five. But it was such an exquisite journey. It was such an opportunity to really connect with nature, to connect with people. I had never taken photographs before. This was one of the first times that I really did that. And I assure you, it will not be the last time that I head back to East Africa. Tanzania, again, I would definitely do. It is economically friendly. Often you can get some great single rates to travel there. Kenya is up on my list as well. And for certain, I do want to get down into Zambia and Zimbabwe and Victoria Falls and whatever it is with animals, I think we'll always find it somewhere in Africa. But I'm delighted and thank all of you for joining me on our journey tonight, on our armchair journey, on Jennifer's journey to East Africa, to Tanzania. Wednesday night, I'll be back the same time, same place. In fact, every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday until May 1st. The same time, the same link. We'll go someplace different. Next time, it will be the Bermuda Triangle. Some other things I'm thinking about are Russia. No, you can always look at the content on Jennifer Reynolds Travels on YouTube as well as on Facebook. And our friends at collagetravelradio.com also carry our content. Sunday Armchair Travel does also air on Collage Travel Radio at 1 p.m. on Sundays. Thanks, everybody, for joining us. Again, Wednesday evening, I'll be back for the Bermuda Triangle, and maybe Italy will make a round trip. We'll bring her back again. But thanks for joining me. And again, you can review everything on Jennifer Reynolds Travels on Facebook and YouTube. Have a great evening.